Hello. Ooh, I'm small. Hang on just 1 second. Let me change. It's better. Welcome to the show, you guys. It's the Shadow Davis Show. It's Wednesday, June the 10th, 2026. A very special guest on the show tonight. This is something that I have been setting up. Well, we've been setting up for the past month now. And finally, tonight, even though he's not here just yet, he will be very soon. Our guest tonight is Matthew Ehret. Matt is the founder of the Canadian Patriot Review, CanadianPatriot.org, and Canadian Patriot Press on YouTube, as you can see right here. He's got a lot of videos on this YouTube page, including the present danger of Hitler revitalization. As you can see right there, pictured are Stu Peters and Nick Fuentes, who may or may not be telling the truth here. Matt is a researcher. He goes deep into these things. He can spot psy-ops. He understands what's what in the world, and that is the reason that I wanted him on the show tonight. Also, his latest video is called Black Sun Rising, the Esoteric Roots of Fascism, Past and Present. We're going to show you a clip of that in just a moment. Matt is, like I said, a writer, a producer. He is a journalist, a lecturer, and founder of the Canadian Patriot Review, BRI expert on tactical talk and senior fellow at the American University in Moscow. We're going to bring Matt on in just a second. But first, I want to give you guys this clip from his newest piece, his newest video called Black Sun Rising. Again, the esoteric roots of fascism, past and present.
Is it possible that nearly 80 years after World War II, the dream of a new global fascist Reich envisioned by Hitler and Mussolini may yet be upon us? With the increasingly unavoidable reality that much of our history has been composed of nothing but dark lies, the popularity in conspiracy theories has grown in leaps and bounds. And while that may not be such a bad thing, since all of our history and present world has been shaped by conspiracies for good and for bad, it must be acknowledged that not all conspiracy theories are true, and some are simply wrong. But how do we differentiate the false from the true? One particularly startling vein of conspiracy narrative that has gained popularity in recent years, and which has targeted a large number of Christian-leaning conservatives, involves the idea that Hitler may not have been the villain, but was in fact the hero of World War II. Due to heavy doses of propaganda, an echo chamber of narrative shapers, and also incredibly evil behavior from Israel's own elite obsessed with a Greater Israel program involving the ethnic cleansing of much of the Middle East, it is understandable that many well-intentioned people have come to believe that the cause of all the world's problems are, once again, the Jews. And of course, if this simplistic equation be true, then it logically follows that literally every movement that hated the Jews throughout history can be quickly given a clean, rehabilitated gloss, including the Crusader Knights that launched the Crusades 1,000 years ago, and of course, the Nazi movement of the 20th century. Some examples of the type of pro-Nazi propaganda that is emerging onto the scene in today's world includes, but is not limited to, the 10-part neo-Nazi series Europa: The Last Battle, and the newest film produced by the former mercenary turned rapper turned conspiracy guru Stu Peters, dubbed Occupied. Influencers like Nick Fuentes have arisen seemingly out of nowhere, garnering tens of millions of followers who don't mind the fact that the young provocateur loudly asserts that Hitler was a cool, patriotic leader who led a cool, patriotic movement to restore the dignity of the German population. And let's not forget Kanye West, who has released clothing lines featuring swastikas and has featured Hitler's speeches infused into his popular music. So, while a positive rehabilitation of Hitler's image is undoubtedly underway, and it is also worth asking, do those who promote the rebranding of Hitler's image have any idea what the Führer and his higher command were doing in Wewelsburg Castle? Do people know why the black magicians of the Thule Society and Himmler's New Templar Order were attempting to invoke demons to help usher in an age of Kali Yuga, resetting all of humanity for a 1,000-year Reich? Does Nick Fuentes or his followers have any idea why Hitler literally rewrote the entire Bible, introducing an Aryan Christ and new commandments such as keep thy blood pure and honor thy Führer? Do you know why the top command of the Nazi elite were never punished after World War II? And why organizations like NATO, the European Union, or even US and British Special Forces continued a Nazi vision for creating a reset of all of human civilization, in most cases directly under Nazi supervision throughout the entirety of the Cold War? Do you think that any of this may affect the world that you are currently living in? Let's explore that.
You know what, Matt? That seems like a great starting point. Why don't we begin there?
That was intense. It's an intense way to start a show. Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Dude. Seriously, man. You know what I want to do? I want to start at the beginning, and that means welcoming you for the very first time to the Shadoe Davis Show. Thank you for coming on tonight. Appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thank you for reaching out and inviting me.
Yeah, it's this is something I've been wanting to do for a while, and I'm so happy we're finally able to set it up for tonight. I want to start at the beginning, though, and that means for a lot of our audience that's brand new to this, there's some people that, they know there's something going on. They're grade one, really. They're on page one, chapter one of this whole thing, whereas, some of us are a little bit more further advanced, and you seem to be right at the end of the book series. So you pretty much know what everything means, and I'm sure you even still have some questions, but you've dug very deeply into this. So a question that a normie might have when somebody like us would say, oh man, they're doing it again, or this is them, they're doing it. The normie would say, okay, who's them exactly? Which generally leaves us without an answer, and we're kind of sputtering at that stage of the game, right? Like, well, it's the cabal, it's the group of them, right? And so how do we answer that exactly?
Well, because there's a lot of moving parts that all kind of are different aspects of the one thing. It's that oneness that unites the moving parts that people, I think there's been a lot of work to make it difficult to get the mind around that, as far as a continuous agency that has been exerting influence, always in a very bad way, for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So I think if you go back to a lot of the writings of Herodotus, of Plato, of Socrates, well, Socrates didn't write, Plato wrote the dialogues with his master as a personality within the dialogues. But a lot of the ancient writers, Aeschylus also wrapping a lot of these truths and insights into his plays like Prometheus Bound, on the Persians, the Persian War, and the actual battles that Greece had waged against the Persian Empire. We're talking here 400, 500 BC. There's a lot of insights that people miss that would give them an understanding about the nature of the structures of power that maintained a continual existence and modus of operandi over the course of many civilizations that it latched onto, that it infiltrated, that it took over, that it turned into an empire, a seat of what's known as a martial lord, as the Babylonian priesthood referred to Persia as its martial lord once Cyrus was brought in and paid fealty to the temple, the high priesthood of Marduk. That was one of the things that Cyrus did when he was basically starting off the new Persian Empire, which for a couple of centuries became the primary conduit for that old Babylonian priesthood to exert its influence onto the world in an attempt to do what Babylon failed to do.
So the answer to the question then to the normie would be Babylonians. It's Plato.
Yeah. Well, it's the Babylonian priesthood. It's a system of Babylon, I think, and there is a system of bloodlines that maintain a continuous inbred continuity that try to create myths about them somehow being of a superior nature than the slave families that are born from less pure stock. Let's just say. So there's certain stories that are cooked up, concocted to justify whether or not I know what one thing which is a hot topic in certain elite circles is the idea that Jesus didn't actually die, that he continued to have babies with Mary Magdalene, that those babies were protected and became the progeny that gave rise to the different bloodlines of the noble caste, the royals of Europe.
The Da Vinci Code, right?
Da Vinci Code. Yeah, well, the Da Vinci Code, exactly. That was a popularization for the mass mind of something that was held for centuries to be a truth for the inner elites. So like one of Dan Brown's books that he used to formulate his so-called piece of fiction was Holy Blood, Holy Grail, co-written by a guy named Michael Bagnon in 1981. And this book, Michael Bagnon himself was a Grand Master, a high-ranking official within the the Quator Coronati Grand Masonic Lodge, the United Grand Lodge. So the Quator Coronati, for those who don't know, was set up in 1882 by the emissaries of King Edward VII, including Sir Charles Warren, who did the first excavations of Solomon's Temple in Palestine back in 1863-64. Sir Walter Besant, the handler of Annie Besant, his sister-in-law, who he had positioned to be the head of a very powerful, influential organization called the Theosophists. She was a Fabian Society member. And her handler was the treasurer of this Quator Coronati Lodge. And so the entire biblical archaeology system originated with these Freemasons who were of the belief that, again, they were Gnostics. They didn't believe Jesus died. They believed that there was a secret bloodline maintained by certain secretive orders that infused themselves into various royal families, and then justified why the royals were royal, why they were born of just better, why they didn't have to work for a living.
And why do we sit back and accept all of that, right? Because okay, whatever, it's easier than just having to question it. And besides, there's a football game on tonight, so I don't, right? So they've been able to perpetuate this for thousands or at least hundreds of years, is what you're saying here, correct?
Well, it's the bread and circus.
I mean, the control of societies and everything else that we're dealing with today, they have been able to do to different societies, whether it's the year 437 AD or 200 BC or the Dark Ages or whatever. This is how long this has been going on. That's amazing. My father couldn't even get me to believe what he was thinking about anything, right? So how is it that father has passed it down to son, to son, to son, to son for this long? It's incredible.
It's quite something, and it's unfortunate too, because it's so unnatural. It takes a lot of work to try to create these perverse institutions that are designed to bring out the worst in those who are dubbed the slave caste. As you pointed out, the football game's on, right? There's so many. There's such a design in this type of slave culture that's been incubated, that's been honed like an art of stupidification. And it would be so much easier just to let human beings just grow and mature in a natural way, where we could be and tap into our divine, better part of ourselves, our more noble part, and contribute so much more back to the civilization that we were born into, and die happy knowing that we've participated in a positive way to the flow of the human experience.
What would their fear be if they were to just let humanity go off on its own and achieve or not achieve the things that it puts its mind to? I mean, why are they so scared of us?
That's a great question, Shadow. And I think that um, the best answer to that I've ever found, honestly, I shit you not. I'm not beating around the bush here. It's in Aeschylus's Prometheus Bound. Um, and I don't know if have you ever read Aeschylus or
No,
no?
no, no.
It's a he's an interesting figure who was a patriot of ancient Athens and a playwright. He was one of the greatest playwrights in history. And in his he did a trilogy of which only part two of the three parts trilogy exists. It's that survives with the name I just gave, Prometheus Bound. And I think what he's intervening in a universal way, in a big way, by shedding light on the structure of why empire, why this oligarchical parasite needs to crush creativity and goodness, what its insecurities are. And basically the story, the way he opens up the story is that you have this character Prometheus who is being tied, he's being chained to a rock by the emissaries of Zeus. And Zeus is sort of he's the big tyrant of the universe running Mount Olympus. And Zeus is pissed because he forbade the most important of Zeus's laws, which is that mankind, the mortals, must never be granted permission to learn the essence of fire. That's only for the immortals of Olympus to understand that technology. But Prometheus goes through, and as he's having different dialogues with different people who are coming to him as he's about to be tortured for 10,000 years. And he could get out of it if he just tells certain things that Zeus wants to hear, but he won't do it because he says that he unlike Zeus and the other gods, he saw that mankind was more than his slavish status rolling in mud and living in ignorance. And he saw this potential. And with basically after a night of drinking and orgying, which Zeus was wont to do, he stole the fire that Zeus wasn't paying attention to. And with that, he explains how he taught mankind not just how to use fire, but also how to do harvests, how to do animal husbandry, how to do metallurgy, how to understand the stars, the arts. So the fire becomes a metaphor for something much bigger, right? As far as the creative spark that we can awaken inside of ourselves that ties us to the ability to discover God's creation and then live in greater dignity, right? Build in harmony with God. But
once we were alerted to the fact that we can do these things, that's when freedom became a thing, I suppose.
I would say so. What you can't put that genie back in the bottle, right? When you get a sense of that joy, of those higher pleasures of discovery and dignity, and you kind of don't want to, you're not happy going back into the cage anymore. So I think you're right. The freedom movement came out of that in a big way. And I think the oligarchy, like the Zeusians, the self-professed gods of Olympus, because I think the gods, whether it's of the pharaoh or any of the ancient characters or casts of godmen, they were always oligarchs who tried to convey an image to the plebes that they were immortals, not to be. You don't even bother trying to uprise against the gods. You're not a god. You're a lowly mortal. You there's no point. You're just going to get hurt. So I think that there's a fear of losing control by that comfortable the blue blood caste that finds themselves too drunk on their sense of ego and grandeur and comfort and their palatial estates that they're born into. And somehow it creates like a drunken feedback loop where they start needing to think about how do they maintain order and stability, which is in their minds the greatest good. As Henry Kissinger even said, the greatest model for his formation of an identity going into geopolitics when he was still a young man was his studies of the Congress of Vienna of 1815 and Metternich and Castlereagh. And he makes the point that in his mind, what made the Congress of Vienna, which was the restoration of the oligarchies in 1815 to stop the rise of revolutionary fervor across Europe that was spreading in the wake of the American War of Independence. Kissinger says, well, what made that so good is it was focused on the ethic of stability, of no change, of stasis. And stasis is the good. Anything that breaks stasis and creates uncertainty is thus bad in their weird formulation. So you see how then any evil that I do that defends stasis and that prevents or that reduces instability becomes a good that is justifiable. So you could do acts of evil that are then tied to the greater good,
and you can justify it for sure, right? You know, I mean, so this is like as it manifests itself today. We talk about the oligarchs of today, or the Zeuses of today. You've got the Elon Musks and the Peter Thiels and the Larry Finks of the world, who are, you know, very high up the food chain when it comes to status, right? And I suppose these guys want everything to stay the same, and they want to be able to control because they know best. Let me ask you this, though. I mean, in the mind of a billionaire, somebody like Elon Musk, and we've seen a lot of interviews with Elon Musk. We know that he's a transhumanist. We know that, you know, it's clear he believes that man and machine are going to merge one day. We can get into that a little bit later on. But do these guys feel as though we're insects? That the human race is nothing but a bunch of insects crawling around?
Yeah, I think that that's a fair characterization of their thinking, I believe, overall. Ultimately, human beings, it's kind of like Soylent Green. I think if you want to get the idea of how the oligarchy thinks of human beings, watch the movie with Charlton Heston from 1971, Soylent Green. And it's you can just feel the misanthropic hate of humanity that just, it oozes out of the script. And the way that humans are just portrayed as these like overpopulated, global warming causing viruses, you know, and it's set in 2025, right? It's kind of eerie. And, you know, what are you doing? Like the whole movie is geared around Charlton Heston's character, this cop who's trying to figure out what is the Soylent company that's running our society, and what is the Soylent that's this delicious Soylent that we're all given rations of every day to eat. Where does this come from? And why are all of these old people getting medical assisted suicide so easily every single day? And, you know, Soylent is people, you bastard. He does a Planet of the Apes thing, right? Like, he's like, it's us, you bastards.
You bastards. I swear to God, man. Like, so here we are, the insects, trying to figure out who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, what is a psy-op, what isn't a psy-op, who's telling the truth, who's bullshitting us, right? So, you know, the clip we played earlier, you mentioned Stu Peters, and you've got Nick Fuentes in there, and these guys rising up with this new revitalization of Hitler as the good guy of World War II, which is interesting to me. And that series, actually, what's it called? Europa, that 10-part series?
Yeah.
Which I have watched and found interesting. I'm not sure if it's absolutely historically correct or not. Can you verify?
Yeah. Well, that's why I did the movie. So the little trailer that you played is the opening of a broader 75-minute film we just released last Saturday, my wife and I, and Jason Dahl, our Yukon-based filmmaking genius that we've been
I got to tell you, man, like the stuff you put up there, it's absolutely top-notch, like amazingly produced, very well done. So congratulations.
Thank you. And again, big praise to Jason Dahl, who's the multimedia guru that we befriended, and has been making a lot of our ideas into these beautiful documentaries that just blow me away every time. So thank you. But that was part of the impetus, was the fact that I could see, I watched most of the Europa series. I think I got about halfway through, and I saw the influence it was having because it went viral. And so many of my friends, my followers, were writing to me very confused, like asked me questions when that came out in 2022, I guess now, or 2023. Asked me questions like, hey, maybe Hitler really was the good guy. Maybe Hitler actually was the hero. And you know, I had to watch the movie to figure out, why are they thinking this? And straight up, like, the image of Hitler that we have been given in the mainstream history is full of holes. Like, it's kind of this cartoonish evil supervillain type of character, which is clearly not true. It's full of fallacies. The official story is full of fallacies, but it doesn't mean he's the good guy, right? Either. And that's part of why we decided to really focus on the black magicians, the inner sorcerers at the inner core of the SS, of the rise, what gave rise of fascism more generally in the wake, especially of World War I, but also specifically of Nazism. It's a German variation.
Okay, so what is the difference when we talk about fascism? Because we got all these brown shirts marching around out there these days, protesting whatever happens to be the next thing, and they're calling everybody fascist, right? For just asking a question. And I don't believe they know what the definition of that word is. But I want to hear from you, and because you mentioned that Nazism is just the German variant of fascism, right?
Yeah, it's one of many. You had, like you said, there's the Mussolini black shirts. Mussolini had a version in Italy of corporatist fascism that was a little bit more Catholic oriented. You had versions in Quebec, like Adrien Arcand, the Quebec Führer in the 1930s and 40s, who had the blue shirts, and he was very much more of a pro-Vatican Catholic variety, less corporatist, a little bit more of the German Nazi socialist type. Nazism, they had their own Reichsbible. So Hitler literally rewrote the Bible, created a new sanctioned Bible that I alluded to there, that got rid of most of the Old Testament, rewrote the laws to keep thy blood pure, honor thy Führer, a few other things too. And again, the French had their own synarchist form of fascism under the Vichy France. It had a slightly different flavor, a little bit more inclined with what the American Legion was when it was set up in 1919 as modeled as a fascist regime.
So it's an ideology that mutates depending on the region or the people.
Yeah, it has I think fascism as a whole is an idea of organizing society around a overhuman class who will not be held accountable for what they do to the many, who have to be kept in a state of inferiority, stupidification in some way, as playthings of the gods. So that's how I think of the invariant. No matter what flavor it comes in, what it has in common is that you have an overlord class of self-professed overhumans managing underhumans, Ubermenschen managing under, Untermenschen, or transhumanists managing the lowly humans who are going to go extinct, unless we maybe wire them with some Neuralinks and some CRISPR and maybe, modify them like, a la Aldous Huxley in Brave New World and create a caste system perhaps of alphas, betas, gammas, and maybe make us a little bit more relevant, a little bit longer until the machines ultimately render most of us dead. So there's,
he's talking like Musk is talking robots in the next 5 years that are going to be dead. He's talking about universal high income, not basic, universal high income. And this goes to the technocrat thing, which I want to talk to you about a little bit later on. But people, Matt, they've been trying to pick winners. They're trying to go good guy, bad guy, or as what was that 4chan thing? White hat, black hat.
Yeah.
I forget what that was now.
That was QAnon.
QAnon, right? Yeah. Duh. So, who are there good guys out there? Guys who are actually trying. I know that when you go through history, you mentioned Roosevelt was actually somebody who was trying to bust the city of London's oligarchical control over the entire world, and maybe Reagan before he got shot, and a few other highly placed politicians over the years may have been people who were working against the system. So who do you see as, because you look at this, you look at this through a very different lens than the rest of us do. Who do you see as somebody who's working towards the greater good of humanity as opposed to somebody who's just trying to keep us down and control us?
Well, let's.
Or are they all just titans fighting with each other and they don't give a rat's ass about it?
No. There's good human. There's mensch. I think so. Maybe we'll rather than tackle that directly with an assessment of different individuals who I think have merit in the present moment in history.
Donald Trump. Do Donald Trump.
I'm weary.
I'm kidding. I appreciate what you're saying. I appreciate it.
But I think part of the thing of the oversimplification and stupidification of our idea of what is good and evil. Like good and evil it's a profound philosophical idea, and it does exist. There is such a thing as good, and there is such a thing as its opposite, evil. But it's not something that we can sort of get the essence of through the kind of comic book, DC comic, Lex Luthor, Superman, World Wrestling Federation, the Hulk Hogan is clearly the good guy. The Undertaker is clearly the bad guy until they switch, right? And,
yeah. And then they're having beers backstage anyway after the show's over.
Right. So I think that there has been an acclamation of our minds to get an overly simplistic and thus naive and false notion of what either one of those terms, good and evil, and its representatives are. Oftentimes people are mixed bags, like it's not like you typically don't have this perfect being of goodness and pure light in general throughout history. You have people who sometimes they're on a wayward path and they discover something inside themselves that they want to work on and make better and to grow. And John F. Kennedy had his problems. Martin Luther King Jr. had his problems. Franklin Roosevelt, Teddy, everybody has problems, but what made them, I think, very dangerous to the oligarchy is that they tapped into this Promethean spirit within them. The Promethean archetype is something that everybody has as a natural state in our latent in our soul. And it's whether you feed it or you don't feed it and you stifle it that will determine to what degree it awakens. And, when you look at John F. Kennedy, you listen to his speeches, you look at, you read the speeches of Lincoln, and look at what he did, what types of risks he was willing to take, what types of security he was willing to lose as far as even his own life and being self-aware that he was willing to. And they were all very much aware that their life could end based on the choices that they were making, but they were more willing to do that than to live a long life with without their conscience being satisfied. So they cared for the health of their soul, their immortal soul, more than their mortal body. And they had a strong sense of justice that they really chose to fight for and to get a better understanding of and to live according to and walk that walk. So Hitler didn't have those. Unfortunately, he had more ego. When you listen to his speeches, when you listen to what his self-image was, what types of personalities he permitted himself to be organized around or to be influenced by, and what types of policies like eugenics, the mass sterilization of the unfit, the Tiergarten 4 laws that he passed that killed or that sterilized, 350,000 Germans before it expanded to other gypsies, other unacceptable people. That's sick. He could have known better, and people could say, oh, that was the time. Those were the times. And it's like, no, but a lot of people in those times morally rejected eugenics. It's not like that was a universally consensus thing. You had to have something wrong with how you think of yourself and human nature to think that was a good thing to do. So I think there was a lot of people who may have known about it, but just stood silent and did nothing. Right. And we see that all through history. And I guess most recently with COVID-19 and that shot that was going around too. Right. Like people going, you know what? I don't want it. I don't want it. I'll take it because I can keep feeding my family if I do. Or they know for a fact that things are completely and totally haywire. They've gone sideways, but they don't say anything. They just get along to go along. Yeah. And I'm sure there's so many different examples you could cite over the years. Jordan Peterson, right? Somebody who a lot of people looked up to as a role model against the woke insanity. And he did quite a lot of good, I think, to just awaken a lot of young people to the transparency of how ideas and a battle over ideas work and what is fascism. And he ironically warned his students so many times. We've all seen the clips on YouTube where he's talking to his students, these classrooms, telling them that if fascism came about again today, I guarantee you nobody here would recognize it. You would all be walking in lockstep because you didn't deal with the inner darkness inside of yourself that it will tap into and mirror, and you will thus lose yourself as you become the thing. He said that, and it was true what he said. And then the second COVID drops on us, he's immediately telling everybody, just get the shots, turn off your brain, stop thinking for 6 months, just follow the experts, and we could just get back to normal. And I want to live my life, and I want to go to the store. He just showed that he himself was victim to the very thing he was warning against.
Yeah. It's so disappointing for me to see people who initially stood up against everything. Yeah. And then, after getting a bit browbeaten on social media, or maybe even in real life, you're out at the store, as you say, and somebody walks up to you and says, "My grandmother died because of you." Like, how do you even know that? I mean, I had people come up to me genuinely and say things like that to me. Like, I was walking through a park one spring day 5 years ago, and some guy comes running by. He's out for a jog, and he goes, "You killed my mother." And I said, "Oh, dude, relax. You don't even know what you're talking about, right?" Could have been a bad scene, but that's how people were thinking. And I didn't let it scare me or intimidate me into stopping doing what I'm doing. But yet we have seen so many people just kind of crawl back in to their shells because of the pressure, maybe, or it's too tiring to keep doing this. Any number of reasons.
There's definitely a lot of exhaustion. It's very, very unfortunate that so many people. I guess that's the thing, they're trying to do the same thing that they did last week and last month and last year, but they're not changing their overarching paradigm. They're not actually making a leap, a discovery with all of the work that they've been doing. And if you don't make that discovery and you don't create a new platform on which to hypothesize and look at the world that's a qualitatively superior leap than what you were formerly operating on last week, last month, last year, then it will tire you out. It will run you down, and you will just give up at a certain point and say, I can't do it. Give me a beer. Let me turn on the game. I'm going to tune out now. And I've seen so many people who are fired up, in the battle against COVID, and they're fired up in the trucker convoy in Ottawa. And it was vitalizing, but because they didn't continue to grow, they didn't use that as an impetus to keep that fire growing. They're just petering out. And that's so dangerous, because that's exactly what the oligarchy always wants people to just kind of like ultimately give up in exhaustion and go back.
Well, they run psy-ops, right? Like, to keep you demoralized. And, you see, get into politics here for just a second. I see people like Michelle Ferrari, who goes online and she's posting things like, the Liberals just voted today that they want to give judges the right to give minimum sentences to rapists and thieves and whatnot. And she can't figure out why. Say, well, Michelle, you know what? It's probably because it's part of the agenda. It's the agenda that they're on. There is absolutely zero other logical reason for what they're doing. It's the same thing with the mass migration that eventually is going to. Oh, I wanted to ask you before I forget, and this conversation is going to go in a lot of different ways, you guys. So just stay with us, okay? Stay with us for the whole time, because you're going to find it all fascinating. We have got some serious temporary immigrants in this country. And the population of the country ballooned from 38 million pre-COVID to 41 million now. And I guess they're counting temporary residents in those numbers. All of these people seem to be coming from one spot in the world. And I'm wondering why that is. Does that have to do with the City of London, the British Empire / Commonwealth? Is it a deal that's been made? I mean, like, what exactly is going on here? And why is it only that one area?
Well, yeah, you do have a. I mean, I don't want to get your show canceled. I don't know if you're streaming on YouTube or whatever.
Dude, go ahead, man. Yeah. If I get canceled, just start a new channel. I've had 4 YouTube channels like blown up in the past 5 years. This is my 5th one now. So if I get another one blown up, I'll just start another again.
Well, this may not be so for both in these days anyway to talk about this, but there has been. It's often played out a little bit, but there is something known as the Great Replacement as an agenda. That is a thing that's been thought through. Some have called it the Kalergi Plan, the Coudenhove-Kalergi Doctrine, as one aspect of what this thing is. If you could read even some of the official policy papers adopted by the UN and commissioned back in 2000 by Eric Weinstein, one of the founding fathers of the intellectual dark web. He was working for the UN. And he was commissioned to draft their official policy document on basically mass immigration and weaponizing mass immigration, which was adopted. It became UN policy. And this is something that then created a crisis, by a very foreseeable crisis, where you, on the one hand, will
Like, duh. I mean,
Yeah.
how could you not see this? You could talk to anybody on the street and say, okay, so we're going to bring this many people from this country, a different culture, and we're going to pour them into your country.
Yeah.
And then we're going to see what happens. A great experiment.
And it's always the same results, you know. If I mean, of course, if we have abundance, if we're in a society which is abundant, it's industrial, productive, abundance creating, future oriented, we can absorb a lot of people. Like, it's actually doesn't, like, that's where America had their Statue of Liberty principle, and, you know, give us your weak, give us your oppressed, and people flooded into the land of the free in the end of the 19th century, early 20th century, because America still had a much more optimistic, oriented, future, oriented vision, and it was able to take on a lot of those foreigners. There were obviously fights, gang fights, Irish versus Italians and whatever. Hey, yeah, there was the ugly part of it, but overall, over a few generations, people were able to integrate, to become productive members of society. And, there's more play if you have abundance, if you have scarcity, if you have a controlled demolition of the economy. So there's more scarcity, fewer jobs, more uncertainty, more fear of the future, more fear of, am I going to feed my kids? And then on top of that scarcity, now you have more bodies coming in from other countries. From, as you pointed out, a lot of it comes from one particular country, but so you got, Indians coming in, you got people also from North Africa, from the Middle East coming in, from countries who, it's like, there's levels to this, right? Because why are they coming in? Are they coming in because they just hate their countries? Not really. Like, most of those people, if they were given the choice, would rather probably stay in the countries that their grandparents were born into, except that for the case of, the Syrian refugees, that get funneled into Europe, or Libyan refugees into Europe or Canada or the US. A lot of these countries, we blew them up. We just blew up their countries by design for 20 years of bombing Iraq, and then bombing, regime changing Libya. Canada participated in that rape and destruction. We contributed 10% of the bombing logistics to destroy and overthrow Gaddafi, and create nothing except for a more destroyed society where people couldn't live anymore, and they had to then escape Libya to go elsewhere to try to feed their family.
I don't recall us bombing India, bro.
No, we didn't bomb India. But India, so the problem with India here is that it's part of the crown jewel. So it's part of the British Commonwealth.
Mm-hmm. And
so part of the formula for India has been, India's been broken. The British got in there back in the 1760s. And over the course of the British dominance of India, they nominally gave up, they gave them political independence in 1947, but it came with some big strings attached. But for the 200 years that England controlled their crown jewel, they oversaw literally 20 controlled famines by design to control the population, because the British Empire was very, very obsessed with the science of population control.
Wow.
And undoing the damage of overpopulation. And the Indians just, as Churchill even said, they reproduce like rabbits, and he, in his time managing during World War II, he oversaw, he consciously acknowledged, because he had generals who were telling him, if we take this food out of India, upwards of 3 million Indians will starve to death. And he said, but they breed like rabbits. We want them for backup rations on the front. So just take it out. And they did. And the Indians died in those very same numbers. And it horrified. People are like, oh, but Churchill, he meant, he was at war, and he was a creature of his time. Of course, he was a little racist, but
let's starve 3 million people. I don't see how that's, the excuse of being a creature of your time works in that scenario, man.
No, exactly. And so many other leading generals who were English, who were American in India were like, what are you doing? This is genocide. We're worse than Hitler if we do this. And he did it. So, like in the court, that does something to a people, that type of two centuries and then more of controlled genocide by a foreign power, the creation of while England was there, they amplified some of the worst attributes of the Brahmin sort of, there is this chosen people syndrome inside of the Indian cultural matrix, right? That you have the caste system, which the British were very happy to amplify the caste system, so that only 10,000 British soldiers, as they like to brag, could control 400 million people. How? Because they encouraged local house slaves to be propped up, to have a superiority complex over their inferior caste cousins, and then manage them locally, right? You have the British Raj, you have a lot of the Sikhs that the British used, as well as the warrior class that would do a lot of the heavy lifting, the putting down of slave revolts, right? So they would, and then they would give rewards. They would give promises, even like, hey, you know what? If you keep working for us, we'll give you a country. We'll give you a Khalistan. That's what the British promised a lot of the Sikhs, you know. And so a lot of the Sikhs were like, no, we're good. We don't need that. And then some of the Sikhs were like, yeah, that's ours. That's, you promised us. And so they incubated these ideologies, right?
Wow.
And became devoted to becoming servants of this higher supranational power structure that was also doing the same thing in China, organized the creation of the green gangs, right? That would end up being some of the most important infrastructure for the growth of the international drug cartels throughout the entirety of the Cold War, and even before that, since the Opium Wars. So the British.
Oh, you know, speaking of that, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Did you have your debate with Sam Cooper yet?
I did, yes.
How did that go? Because now, Sam, as you guys know, like you guys watching right now, Sam Cooper is all about China infiltrating Canada, right? You can go to the Bureau on Substack. You can read all about that. We've shared a lot of his stuff here on this show. I think a lot of it is really good, but some of his sourcing is, you know, anonymous. And you argue that China is not exactly as villainous as he points out. I find that fascinating. How did it go, this debate?
It was okay. Right now, if people want to watch the debate, they have to become a paid subscriber to Sean Newman's Substack, and you can get it there. It wasn't so much. Sean asked us. He didn't really want it to be a too confrontational of a debate, and I like his approach. You know, he's a podcaster. He's a host, so he wanted to maintain kind of that sort of roundtable disposition of a show with respect, and I appreciate that approach a lot. Because basically, it was Sean bringing up certain topics pertaining to accusations that Sam Cooper had made about the essence of China in this or that regard, in regards to fentanyl or in something else. And then what are both of our takes? So it wasn't us so much clashing with each other so much. Just, you know, people could just compare which evaluation they think makes more sense to them.
Yeah.
But I do think in studying Sam's work, I did find some limitations, perhaps, with the trust that he has placed into the intelligence agencies, the security state apparatus, that feeds him a lot of information about what the problems are, that he should be a conduit for convincing Canadians how to think about various objective, very true problems that we have. But how to think about it, how to interpret them, I think he trusts too much entities and institutions that I, in my research, find to be the most untrustworthy institutions in the world. If there was going to be a foreign entity that was out to destroy my society and enslave my people, it's located a little bit closer to the city of London, which directs a lot of those intelligence agencies that he trusts very deeply, like CSIS, like the CSE, the RCMP, which are all part of the Five Eyes complex under MI6 and the GCHQ, that also run the NSA as part of the CIA complex in America. They have a South African and New Zealand and Australian branch. But this Five Eyes apparatus is, I think, much more closer to this insidious, very devilish power that is at the heart of the murder of JFK, at the heart of the creation of the destruction of the Twin Towers in 9/11, which had less to do with a guy in a cave and much more to do with these intelligence agencies. And for those who might be watching this live stream and might be shocked by what I'm saying, just look into it. Stop living under a rock. It's available for
you. You know what? I don't know that anybody's shocked at what you're saying, but the insight you're providing is actually really cool, because there's a lot of us, Matt, for a very long time, been trying to figure it out. For example, when it comes to China, for me personally, I've been going, all right, I know they're involved in this somehow. I just don't know exactly what their role is here, or how much power they have, or is it the triads who are actually doing all of this? Because we understand China to be a a totalitarian communist state, right? In which the government controls pretty much everything. They've got surveillance cameras all over the place. Their people are on a social credit. I think, unless that's all BS, I don't know. But I mean, we've been hearing that that's the case in some provinces of China. I don't know if that's real. I've never been. I've never seen it personally, right? But, you know, Keir Starmer, for example, he was just in China, I'm going to say a month ago, meeting with Xi Jinping. And to me, it looked as though he was being scolded by Xi for something or other. Almost the way Xi scolded Trudeau at that summit a few years ago, if you'll recall. You remember that? And I thought, this is very interesting. It looks like China's really running this shop here. But in your take on it, it's actually the City of London. And I'm going to get you to explain exactly what the City of London is, because there's a lot of people who go, okay, London, like London, England. No, it's different. Yeah. How the City of London actually may still be controlling China in terms of money, because it's all about finances, right?
Yeah. Okay. This is a big topic you're raising, and we can do a whole show on this.
I know, but if you got the time, man, so do we.
I can do it. Right. Yeah, I would say cause and effect are very important when looking at the machinations of world politics, right? Some players are causal, are initiating something, and then others are doing things that are reactive to the thing that is being caused by somebody else. And what is often done in the reframing for us media consumers, people trying to make sense of things, is that you have narratives concocted that then will often do a little switcheroo, a little sleight of hand, which will make it seem like those who are reacting are actually the ones who are causing the bad. And I would say, for when I map out the history,
like in a hockey fight, you mean? Like the person who reacts is the one that gets the penalty?
Right. That's a great example. I'm going to use that. That's amazing. That's a perfect example.
That's of course before the instigator penalty became a thing. Anyway, I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's a perfect example, right? One thing, there's so many angles to approach this. I brought up, so one of the biggest lies that I think has been one of the biggest lies, there's two big lies. Number one, that the Nazis didn't win World War II, and World War II was won by the good guys, game over. That's not true. Most of the Nazis were not punished and were simply repurposed by Allen Dulles, by the British MI6, given new assignments in Argentina, in Project Paperclip, in NATO. Like, for example, 8 consecutive Supreme Eastern and Central European Command generals from NATO were all unreconstructed Nazis from 1958 until 1983. All of them unreconstructed Nazis. The entire Reinhard Gehlen, Hitler's top intelligence officer, his top killer, had his whole network re-empowered to run the West German intelligence agencies all the way up through the 1980s. And his progeny continued to do the thing. So it's called the NATO Secret Armies. It's a global paramilitary, highly financed apparatus. Books have been written about this. Colonel Towner Watkins, my wife, have written books about this. Very, very well documented. And one label for it is Operation Gladio. And that's one way to account for why so many people, like, second, third generation spawn of Nazis, find themselves in high positions of power, like Chrystia Freeland, whose grandfather was the top propaganda, like the Ukrainian Goebbels in World War II, or why Blaise Metreveli, the current director of MI6, her grandfather was Hitler's butcher, the top Nazi Waffen SS officer in Ukraine as well. And there's many more. Ursula von der Leyen. Don't ask what her grandparents were doing. Don't ask what Francis Mertz's grandparents were doing, right? But and the list is a big list. And the banks that funded Hitler, the Wall Street, the London banks, the Swiss banks that funded Hitler, were never punished. They continued to exert massive influence after World War II. So it's not like they just cleaned up their act. That's not the case. But they were always conduits. They were always agencies for a higher purpose. They weren't there. Making money wasn't their ultimate end game. That's not why the Bilderberg Group was put online. That's not why.
What does Klaus Schwab mean when he talks about the fourth industrial revolution?
Well, that's basically in his mind. It's you'll eat bugs and own nothing and be a happy slave.
No, I know, but is it the Fourth Reich? Is it like the fourth? Is that what that is?
Right. Maybe there's a little inside joke there. That's very possible. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, like that.
Very possible. But so the other thing here is that that's the number one lie. Number two lie is that the British Empire disappeared after World War II. It gave liberty to all of its colonials, and the new empire that replaced it became the American Empire. That's also a concoction. There's a degree, a smither of truth to that, but not the way people realize. So the British Empire never gave up India. It's simply Lord Mountbatten, who was sort of the emissary, the controller of India during that time, and the Supreme Allied Commander of the Pacific Command of World War II, and then he did the same thing under NATO. He was the guy who oversaw the carving up, the partitioning of India, and the idea that he was basically telling the Indian revolutionaries, those who craved real independence, that hey, just wait. You know what? Wait a year, and we'll then give it to you. We promise. And Gandhi was idiotic enough to go along with that and say, okay, I trust you. And Jawaharlal Nehru was idiotic enough to say, okay, you're letting me boink your wife, so I'll trust you, sure, and we'll bite our and we'll see what you do. And he did, and then the big day happened. And India was told it can now have a responsible government, kind of like what Canada was told in some way. But now you're going to have the Muslims are going to be weaponized to fight the Hindus. The Hindus will be weaponized to fight the Muslims. All of them will be weaponized to fight the Sikhs. And so they took the time to really work the divide to conquer tactics and the inter-ethnic animosity, so that they could create a society that would be much more divided by itself, thus much more capable of maintaining a shadow structure of controls under its Freemasonic caste system and its loyal adepts who are assigned positions to manage the controlled corruption. And they did the same thing elsewhere too. Like Britain said, okay, now we're not an empire, we're going to be a commonwealth. But the actual agencies that allowed the empire to exert influence on the world was never simply the outward funny, the red coats, the funny hats. It wasn't any of those outward things. It was always the city of London is, and like you said, people get confused with the word City of London. Why is this such a big deal? It's the Big Ben. It's like, no, it's not Big Ben. This is a reference to
look, kids, Big Ben, Parliament.
Yeah,
sorry, I have to get that European vacation line in there. Please continue.
But yeah, no, it's an ancient square mile that has it has supranational powers and has enjoyed these supranational powers since, I think, honestly, since the time of Roman Londinium. When London was Roman Londinium, it was also the ISIS cult center. That's why the river Thames is also known today. It has a second name. It's called the River Isis, because it was the center of the ancient ISIS cult. That was a very powerful ancient mystery religion that
back like 2,500 years here.
Yeah, we're talking. Well, when Roman Londinium was a big thing, it was like Julius Caesar was setting up shop. We're talking like maybe 50 BC here.
Okay, 2000 then.
And they subdued the pig. 2000. It's just a flash in the pan. But there has been one control hub of power in this particular geographical area that, by the time of the 8th, 9th centuries, became increasingly a banking hub, whereby you had guilds, these different family-run guilds that each one had a certain fondy, a certain estate that was managed by a committee, tied to certain, again, secret societies that would maintain the continuity. And it had enjoyed, especially after William the Conqueror, it was given very big powers to make its own laws, to make its own, to not have to abide by the laws of the king if it didn't want to. And even today, that's why the City of London has their own legal courts. They have their own police force. They have their own. It's like a power within England per se.
So now it's a city block. It's not very large, right?
It's a square mile, so it's
Okay.
not that big. No, it's small.
And it's got its own Lord Mayor. It's got its own government. Am I correct?
It's got its own internal government.
Like Vatican City almost.
It's like a Vatican City in it's like a chartered city. It's kind of like what Peter Thiel is trying to do with his Prospera in Honduras. You know, it's like a version of that city-state powers that are above all laws, that are a law unto themselves according to some inner thing.
Okay.
And the City of London, yeah, they've got like a remembrancer. That's their official representative in the British Parliament, and the remembrancer has these powers to go and look behind what it's like. Anybody who's a member of Parliament has to be submissive to the remembrancer, who's allowed to like look over their notes, read their policy papers, make suggestions.
What?
Yeah, the remembrancer. There's actually a movie called the Spider's Web.
Okay, I've heard of that.
Yeah, it's I think for free on YouTube. People could watch it, and it does a good job going through the power of the City of London as far as the shell companies, the offshore operations in the Cayman Islands, the Isle of Man, basically also Wall Street. If you look back at the origins of Wall Street itself in the United States, it wouldn't be incorrect to call it a fifth column of the City of London since 1802, when it was created by Aaron Burr, who was the same guy who soon thereafter killed Alexander Hamilton and tried to, create a civil war and carve up the United States into two separate countries that would both be absorbed back into the British Empire and undo 1776. That same Aaron Burr is the founding father of Wall Street, of the Bank of Manhattan.
Holy shit. So
Yeah,
wait a minute. The American Civil War, was that a British operation?
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's a whole different thing.
That's a show. You said you want to have a few shows. Let's put that on the list. Yeah,
okay.
We'll break that down.
Definitely. I want you back like as a semi-regular on this show, man, because there's so much stuff. So we're talking City of London. Is the City of London completely exempt? Like, does it exist as its own country, as its own city-state? Is it exempt from the UK? Is it part of the UK? Is it part of the Commonwealth?
It's a gray area. It's a gray area. They don't have to, like I said, they don't have to abide by any particular laws of the state per se, because they have their own internal laws, but they are officially part of legally the entity of England per se. So that's a weird thing, right? Of the UK. So it's a weird thing. I don't even fully know how to wrap my mind around it completely, but England is very much one of the other aspects of what gained them their power is their ability to use arbitrary logic that is irrational to justify power. Like, for example, why is it that the ruling monarch, so the ruling monarch, everything is kind of organized around the fount of all honors. The crown is the fount of all honors. So all honors, all authority for law, why law should be respected in any part of the British Commonwealth system is entirely rooted in the ultimate final cause, which is the crown says so. The crown gives the power to this institution to have a corporation, a crown corporation like the Bank of Canada or whatever, to be a thing that should be respected and enshrined within some legal codes or another, within a charter or what have you. That's absurd. That's absurd. Like that means that King Charles can't have a driver's license, because the reasons why driver's license happen, the reason why they have any pull or weight in law is because the crown exists. So the crown can't have a driver's license. They have a license to kill even. There's nothing. And they can also give those powers. They can give it to emissaries that they select. For example, the governor general or a lieutenant governor also enjoys those very powers of the crown, because they are legally the crown's power inside of any particular region that would need to be managed on behalf of the empire per se, right? It's not that's insane.
How much money do you see? I know that you have done some events or maybe some live streams with Susan Kokinda and Barbara Boyd of Promethean Action. And myself and the viewers here, we've recently discovered them, like maybe 6 or 7 months ago. And they've exploded all over social media, which I think is great. They're a bit of a MAGA channel, right? But both very experienced and have been watching the world of geopolitics for quite some time. And they may be associated with the LaRouche organization as well. I'm not sure. Harley Schlanger. I've had him on the show before. What a great guy. And they always talk about the city of London and the war with Donald Trump. This is their thing, right? So, the Strait of Hormuz was always a City of London operation through Lloyd's of London. The Panama Canal, they're funneling their money through Venezuela. I mean, the Ukraine war, obviously, they're getting rich off the Ukraine war with all of the munitions that they're forcing into that area. There's so many different things about the City of London. Is it still that influential in the world that they can actually take on a country with the might of the United States?
Well,
or is this completely off base?
No, and I am very familiar with all of those personalities that you mentioned. They aren't exactly, just to clarify it for the audience, they aren't officially working together. I think that they've split off. So the LaRouche organization and the Promethean Action, they did stem from the same source a few years ago, but then they broke off because they had different ways of looking and thinking about the world. But they have a lot in common too. There's a certain common philosophical view that they both share, that I also share, about the idea that human beings are made free, we're made good, we're endowed with a destiny to be liberated or to liberate ourselves from the shackles of this ancient evil. So I think that they all agree on some of these core fundamentals. Where they diverge, I think, a little bit is on their interpretation of what is animating the Trump team, what is animating Eurasia, China, Russia, elements like that. Whether that can be reconciled or not, I don't really know. I used to be involved with them about a decade ago. I spent about 8 years or 9 years myself volunteering with them when I was younger, from 2006 until 2016. And I learned a lot and I grew a lot. I would say I wouldn't be the person I was today were it not for that experience, which you can't really get very easily in this kind of culture, right?
No.
No.
I mean, there's very few people like us out there, and even more exclusive, you. I think you're one of these very unique people who flies between the different stratas of reality out there, and you're able to piece it together so well. And that's one of the reasons I've been so anxious to have you on the show for so long. So is the City of London at war with Donald Trump right now? What's your take on that?
Okay, so I see it.
And you know what? You don't have to give a final answer.
No, I'm not good at giving final answers anyway, but I'll give it to, like, I try to speak it as far as letting people know how I'm hypothesizing things, because I don't. There are things I still have unknowns in my mind for, but I'll try to make it clear how I'm hypothesizing it. I was much more supportive and optimistic about Donald Trump in his first term. Since his second term, and I did champion his victory. I did my part to try to support his reelection, and to whatever degree, limited degree, I satisfied my conscience, because again, I look at his first term, and I saw a lot of evidence there that there was something very legitimate, something I recognized as part of a historic tradition inside of the United States that was being reawoken, that I could see in the language he was using, and some of the policies and the orientation that he had, especially the orientation to keep the transhumanists away. In his first term, he actually did quite a bit to ensure that the Elon Musks, the Peter Thiels, the Larry Ellisons were kept at arm's reach, not really allowed to be near power. He was going out of his way to provide a policy that would help the United States harmonize its economic situation with nations that are trying to survive the current storm, like Russia, like with China. Russia and China are like very close brothers. They have a survivors alliance, and they've had for years. And I saw that Trump was working hard to do that with both Xi Jinping and Putin. In his second term, unfortunately, I'm seeing less of those positive qualities that I so admired and had a lot of hope for. And I'm seeing something has changed, and I don't like this change. So I do hope that there are patriots in and around him, and I hope that he might even perhaps be a better person who could awaken to his old self once more. You know, he even talked about the American system. He had talked about McKinley. I love McKinley. He talked about Lincoln. I love Lincoln. He talked about reviving protectionism. I'm for protectionism. You know, like all of these things are good if they're honest. And
Right.
and that's the unfortunate thing right now. So number one, the world is going through a massive restructuring. That's definitely happening right now.
New World Order.
Yeah, but it's an underdefined order. We know that the Henry Kissingers, we know that the emissaries of the Western oligarchy that have been working so fervently for so many decades to bring this about have a very, or you know, it's a mixture of like Orwell and Huxley's Brave New World as far as what they want this world order to be, with regions, fascist regions of techno-feudal structures that would then be coordinated by a higher control. H.G. Wells outlined this in his World Brain and The World Set Free, and his Open Conspiracy, but especially the World Brain book that was sort of a manual for the Open Conspiracy. But you have different ideas that are not in harmony with that Orwellian New World Order that involve the idea of protecting the sovereign nation state, having a world based on authentic cooperation, based on big projects to harmonize self-interest instead of going to war, look for ways to like build things. That's good. That's much better, and to create abundance instead of scarcity, and you know that's I think healthier as a way of doing things. The City of London, I think that they're partially looking, because the empire is not geographic, right? It's like the thing that became the British Empire that latched on. It had this area of the square mile as a geographic area, but for many centuries, it wasn't England wasn't yet an empire. You had good people in England like Thomas More, Erasmus, Henry VII. You had some really wonderful people, Jonathan Swift later on, Shakespeare, who were doing what they could to keep England from becoming an empire and losing its soul. The same way Rome was a republic for centuries before it lost its soul and was transformed into an empire earlier. The way it was transformed with Rome was you had the infusion of these mystery cults like the cult of Mithra, the cult of Isis, the cult of Cybele, that were infused into the governing strata that then managed the new regime, and thus the parasite could move as it did from its former sort of, I guess, host, you could say, which was the Persian Empire. And after the Persian Empire collapsed, it needed a new host. And it was testing the grounds. It was like, are we going to go to Pontus, where you had the Mithridates kings for a few centuries? Or will we look at Carthage and maybe make Carthage our host? Or will we make it Rome, which was an ally of Carthage for like 400 years? And there was a period of undecidedness where it was going to go. Ultimately, the decision was to focus on Rome, which was deemed to have the greatest potential to express power on behalf of those Babylonian overlords that had formerly taken control of Persia, that had then moved on to Rome as the new Babylon.
They went for the big one there with Rome.
And it was little at first, right? Because when it was still an ally of Carthage before the Carthaginian Wars, Rome was still just a little city-state. It had a much more noble republican ethos. It was not yet dominated by these mystery cults, but they started getting brought in, getting infused in from Persia via Anatolia, and that's where you had things like the cult of Cybele Attis, which was basically an androgynous cult of ecstatic states where male priests, if you wanted to become a holy man, you'd have to like castrate yourself in a drugged up ecstasy.
And you know what? Everything you're saying here sounds so hauntingly familiar as to what's going on today, and I believe that's exactly what you're doing.
Yes, that's right. And the reason why, so that became so disgusting as far as an introduction that was corrupting the minds of the young of Rome, because they still valued the family. The Roman Republican Stoic tradition still valued having families, having children. And all of a sudden, young men cutting off their schlongs and going to orgiastic states with it. That was pissing off the Romans, and they increasingly became radicalized. And out of that sort of reactionary response, the cult of Mithra, which was like this warrior Spartan male only cult, was able to be brought in as a controlled counter gang operation in a similar way that the National Socialists were the controlled reaction to the radical Bolsheviks of the 1920s, 1930s across Europe.
Wow.
And so they always play these controlled dialectics of you get people into a radically hedonistic state through nihilism, right? And then you know that there will be a new vacuum, a new opposite force that you could then fill of conservative disgust, that then you could play off each other and build institutions that satisfy each one of those states of being.
So that's why the rise of the Stu Peters and the Nick Fuentes is.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
No, am I right in saying that?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Like they're filling a hole. They're filling that gap that you just described.
Yeah, because everyone's, you got school-time drag shows and, radical ideologue activists assigned to become guidance counselors across schools all across the transatlantic world, convincing kids to go through gendered, transformations and stuff. So
I've never seen men, like especially white men, white straight men, is like so vilified in any society, and we've let it happen. We've let it happen. We did it to ourselves by not saying something, right? Like this, all we had to say too was shut up. I mean, that's enough, but we didn't, right?
Yeah.
We fell for it. I don't know why we ever fell. I think now that's starting to rise up too. There's a guy named Andrew something or other. I forget his name. He's a condescending son of a bitch, but he's right most of the time. He's a lot on Instagram and the meta, but he has arguments with women quite often on his show. I forget what his last name is now. You guys might know in the comments. Anyway, this whole masculization thing is coming back now. Just like I'm sorry, go ahead, man.
Dude, totally. Yeah. Well, it's like everybody has, there's a feminine and a masculine aspect to every person. And there's a healthy version of that and an unhealthy, perverse version of those things as well. And just like you could have, in a sick society, women have their estrogenic, neurotic qualities that become more predominant, right? Similarly, in a sick society, men have, there is such a thing as toxic masculinity, right? There's something that's part of the that's why so many men did abuse women and had a superiority complex for centuries against, the female race that was not allowed. My grandmother wasn't allowed to get a credit card and without her husband's signature, giving her permission to have a credit card or pick up her kids from school. Or even like women weren't allowed to vote for a long time, and so Andrew Tate, I think that's what one of your followers is writing in the comments section.
It's not Andrew Tate though. I know. I'm trying to remember the guy's last name, but I totally understand. Andrew Tate's definitely one of them, but it's not the one I'm thinking.
So yeah, there's toxic masculinity, there's toxic femininity, and the oligarchy wants us to only think of those two extremes as our only options and not have an idea of what a healthy family, what a healthy man woman dynamic actually is. That we're not supposed to be aware of. How could a man have both like will, like be a creature of logic and of will, but also of intuition and of heart, right? And how could a woman have both her intuition and her heart attached, like integrated, while also being a thinker using will and judgment? Because as if that's like only a man's domain. It's like, well, you can. There's a way that both of these things work in a male and a female in a healthy way that the oligarchy is afraid of. All that to say, institutions, cults, dominant cults that control the political and cultural policies of a society, of a target society, also will be wired by these extremes. As I mentioned, the cult of Mithra is, I would say, this perverse masculine cult. It was an initiatory degree. All of the Praetorian Guard, all of the upper echelons of the Roman legion, and about 12 Roman emperors were initiates of the cults of Mithra. It was worshipped in underground crypts, usually right below a temple to Cybele Attis. Cybele was the perverse feminine Earth Mother deity, whose male counterpart Attis was this beta male kind of thing who just was gripped with fear of Cybele, his mother, wife, witch kind of character, this devouring mother wife thing that he like cut off his schlong as the story goes and bled out onto the earth, and she like went down to beg Zeus to let him be reborn, and that's why Zeus said, okay, well, I'm not going to let him be reborn, but I'll grant him a pine tree, and if everybody provides rites and gifts every December, the pine will grow again and Attis will be reborn. And that's sort of one of the pre-Christian sort of mythos that was part of that messed up cult. But they played off each other, right? So that's how you kept the society kind of in disequilibrium. And I think the same thing could be said today for, Rome has been, Rome's more recent host was England. So after a period of incubation in a few smaller city-state sort of chartered cities like Amalfi, Venice was an incubator for a long time of the old Roman patrician class and their associated cults, especially during the Crusades. This is what oversaw the Crusades. Rome also maintained a direct existence, right? Rome didn't go away completely, although part of the empire did collapse. Rome, there was still a Holy Roman Emperor. Rome as a power unto itself continued, and it continued to have a form of collaboration with its sometimes rivals, often collaborative sister cities of Venice, of Amalfi, of Genoa, and at a certain point, it needed to find a more reliable host because these areas, especially Venice, were becoming fragile. They were facing destruction by very, very smart people who organized very good conspiracies, like in the 1509 period, where you had the League of Cambrai that was organized by forces very close to Leonardo da Vinci, Machiavelli, King Henry VII was a big player in organizing. But basically, it was all of the powers of Europe stopped fighting each other for 2 seconds. They all came to realize that they were all being manipulated by the ambassadors and the banks of Venice, which by then was controlling most of the international bullion. Most of the international maritime ports and commerce were controlled by Venice. And they said, wait. Rather than fight each other in wars that Venice seems to be funding all sides, how about we all just destroy Venice? And that almost completely wiped Venice out. And Venice realized they did survive this because of some backstabbing and a corrupt Pope, Julius II. They were able to basically sabotage the League of Cambrai before it could completely wipe out their armies. But the Venetian old nobility that went back to the Roman patrician class realized we need to find a more secure area. And that became England, Netherlands, and the British Isles. So for the next 2 centuries, it was a constant effort to infiltrate and then to transform England and the Netherlands from being areas of liberty. The Netherlands had a reputation for being one of the most freedom-loving zones of the Habsburg Empire. There were many wars of independence led by the Flemish, by the Dutch against the Habsburg, rigid, the Habsburgs were a Jesuit-managed, rigid tool of empire, and they couldn't squash this Promethean fire of the Dutch. And the English became a Renaissance hub of science, of literature, of ideas, of creativity. And
so let me guess where you're going with this here, because I find it all very fascinating that what you're saying here is that history continues to repeat itself over and over and over and over and over again. And so going on that, we can say that possibly the city of London is now at war, not just with Donald Trump and the United States possibly, but also maybe with Russia and with China, who you mentioned earlier as, brothers. And we know that Trump seems to have a decent relationship with Putin. I mean, I've been talking about this new geopolitical order for quite some time, and it wouldn't surprise me in the least if it all shook out where Russia and the United States were allies going forward versus the European Union. I mean, it made perfect sense to me the way things were shaken out, which is completely opposite from the world order that we knew growing up. And possibly China's in on this as well. Is that where you're going here?
That would be a positive scenario. Like right now, we definitely have what I can say with greater certainty for sure is that Russia and China have a really solid bond, though it can be broken. It is possible to do another Sino-Soviet split. It won't be easy. It's possible, but that would be very bad if that happens. I hope that the forces who are honest patriots around Trump really mean what they say by wanting good relations with both Russia and China. You know, we're hearing more discussion of the Bering Strait rail tunnel idea that was discussed at Anchorage when Putin met with Trump a year ago. That's coming back now. It was brought up at the St. Petersburg Economic Forum last week on several occasions. The Russians are talking about it, at least. I don't hear the Americans, but maybe the Americans are still maintaining back channels. It would be an interesting game changer. The downside is that I see a Mithraic incubation inside of the United States, which is at the heart of the growth of Silicon Valley and transhumanism. And that's part of the new, so the old order, which is being set to be superseded by a new order, the old order had a certain idea of mercantile capitalism, fiat banking as a control mechanism, debt-based currencies in a conventional way, as we've seen them under the Federal Reserve, the Bank of England, what have you. The new order that's being set up is supposed to be organized around feudal technocratic transhuman technates, which would have micronations of billionaires managing local currencies like the Facebook Libra. You know, you have the X, like Elon Musk has said that he wants X to become his everything app, where people's biometrics, healthcare, IRS filings, as well as social media, fintech, everything where you're, as well as a payment platform, maybe with its own unit of currency, maybe its own form of stable coin might emerge.
So no more governments at all, or maybe just in name only. So now it's an AI, oligarch, tech, fascism. Am I correct? Close.
Yeah, that's right. That's the concern, and that's what they want. That's the end goal of like the dark freedom, the dark MAGA, the dark thing that Elon Musk put on the hat there. That's what Curtis Yarvin, the guru of
that guy's a freak, hey?
Yo, he's
Curtis
scary.
Yarvin. Whoa, man.
But he's useful to listen to get into the mindset of like how the oligarchy actually thinks, because he is an emissary. He's a direct voice representing the old power. Yeah. But he's very aware of what the new brand is supposed to be. So listen to his words. He's not hiding it. He's very transparent, and thus it's useful to read to get into their mindset, because it's a sick place, but you got to know it. So one of the core regions of the world where that had, I'd say the center of that power of Oracle, of Stargate, right, which was first created in the 1970s. That was the first rendition of Project Stargate out of the CIA and this area in Stanford, California, called the Stanford Research Institute, which that was the agency that ran the Stargate projects, run by a bunch of high-level Scientologists like Harold Putoff and Swan, what's his name? Basically, and it was a CIA front operation. It was also tied to MK Ultra, very much so. Stanford was one of the biggest MK Ultra universities that used human children guinea pigs for their mind control experiments. Yeah,
I've had a couple of MK Ultra survivors on the show, man. Like, you know, it's funny because, you know, when they talk about it, they remember certain things and don't remember other things. And one of the women said that, what's his name? Famous Canadian singer was MK Ultra controlled. Leonard Cohen. And I thought, what?
I've heard some nasty things about Leonard Cohen. Yeah, his name comes up a lot.
Yeah. So that's what she said, man. Like, and she said, like, I was in Montreal, right? It happened in Montreal at what university was it that's famous for MK Ultra? Yeah, it's McGill. Yeah. So yeah, MK. That's a whole other show.
Yeah,
we could do.
So why am I? Yeah, so that is another show. So we got to like have a little mental list here of different topics to hit in the future. So yeah, the Stanford is where Elon Musk was initiated, and out of which he became a cardboard cutout, vetted to be a front man for something that was always a military industrial technology. That was always the point from the 90s onward. Peter Thiel also was part of, actually it was Opus Dei. He was brought in when he was at Stanford to be part of Opus Dei. That was one of his mentors, was the California regional leader of Opus Dei.
With the Catholic offshoot?
Yeah, it was it's a like a fascist Catholic subsect.
Right.
Kind of like a dark mirror to the Jesuits.
Yeah, like they're hardcore, man, where they torture themselves.
Yeah, Dan Brown again, right? Da Vinci Code, it comes back.
Oh, that's where that's from. Yeah, right.
But that's actually what they do. That's actually what they do. There's a self-whipping thing going on as part of your penitence for having bad thoughts and being a human, of a creature of pure sin. So that's part of their self-brainwashing mechanism, which has been that's a technique actually, that particular ritual of self-control or self-brainwashing and abusing yourself through whipping yourself actually finds its origins in the cult of Sibel Attis. And one of the hierophants, the male holy men of that cult would have to do that as part of their daily worship.
It's crazy.
I know.
It's crazy. So we're talking about Musk and the second term of Trump, and you're not comfortable with the Peter Thiels and the Larry Ellisons and the Elon Musk surrounding him. I'm not either. I mean, that press conference that he did with Larry Ellison, I think it was about a month after his inauguration. I was like, what? This guy's a freak, man. Like, what are you doing standing next to him? The only thing that I was thinking in that moment was, well, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. And I was hoping for that. I don't know. Because it seems in both scenarios, no matter who wins this battle, this secret war that's going on, whether it's the technocrats, the technocrats are the ones who are going to benefit either way. Whether it's the Trump side, the logic side, the side that does not believe that climate change is happening, the side, or climate emergency, the side that doesn't believe that Pride Month should exist, all of those things, right? There's that side, and then there's the other side, that the World Economic Forum side, whatever. Doesn't seem to matter here, Matt, because the AI centers, the data centers are getting built.
Yeah, so that's the thing, right? Is that even though you have this effeminate, wokeist ethos that's dominating Davos and the European class by and large, maybe except for a few of the Eastern European countries, but that's the dominant cultural matrix in Europe. Under Trump, it seems like we've got a counter response to that, which could be healthy, or it could go the other way. It could go, it could go beyond the healthy zone. And as you pointed out, the data centers are kind of a ubiquitous thing no matter what. So as much as we're told that Keir Starmer and Trump are enemies, well, at the same time as we're being told that, they're signing deals together like the $1.5 billion or billion pound Palantir AI integration deal that they signed like 8 months ago, that integrates Palantir as the governing force of all things England. Their military, their food systems, their NHS healthcare distribution. I'm told similar things to feel a certain way about the drama between Carney fighting back and elbows up against the big, bad, ignorant American imperial types like Trump. But at the same time, he's like overseeing still a massive integration where Palantir has been brought in to manage Alberta's energy policies. The police forces of Ontario, of Alberta, of British Columbia have already been for years now managed by Palantir's operating systems, predictive criminal, thought crimes. So they have software, AI-driven software, to try to map out, based upon what websites you go to, what your bank transactions are, who would be most liable to possibly commit crimes in the future. That's already like embedded, baked into a lot of the different dynamics shaping the Canadian operating system. We just gave over Palantir's Palantir. The Americans just gave Palantir control of being the primary food management and supply management system in all of the United States, overseeing all of the farmers' data, where they get their loans, when they do their crops, what type of fertilizers they're using, but then also managing the supply chains.
That's all Palantir technology?
That's all Palantir. It's a $300 billion deal that they were just given to or $300 million deal that they were just given to the U.S. government, the FDA.
Interestingly, I just saw a story last week out of Brampton, I think it was, where they're added 40 new high definition 360-degree high def cameras to the city to prevent crime. They're all Palantir as well.
It doesn't. So, like you said, it's like if it's a keep your enemies close thing, I get that. Sometimes you got to do that. But you don't give them all of the power of making policy that's going to shape your world. You don't do that. You keep them close and you keep them on a leash so that you can hear what they're going to do and who they're talking to. That's what you do.
That's the point of keeping them closer.
Yeah. You don't
not
put
letting
them in the driver's seat and tell them, and that's what I'm seeing a little bit too much of regarding the massive amounts of freedoms being given right now to this basket of demons like Larry Ellison and company. Elon Musk is celebrating making, vaccines in his 3D printers in Germany. That's something that they just signed on to, that he says is the future, is everyone's going to have access to 3D printed vaccines from Tesla factories. Like, what is this? This is insane. It's insane.
What? Like, this is the champion of free speech too, right? Like, come on, man.
Yeah, the guy was like chiming in on Tommy Robinson rallies and stuff, right? Mossad Tommy Robinson is like he's being sold as the voice of the anti-woke right.
Whoa. Hold on just a second. Now, this is something you just said, Mossad Tommy Robinson. Like, what? Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, he gave all these selfies of himself in Israel. He has his Mossad t-shirt. He's doing, he's like
no.
This out there. Yeah.
Let me ask you what your take is. Now, I want to do psy-ops still, and I want to do Mark Carney, and I want to talk about disclosure day.
Right now?
Well, you know what? Can we jam all that into maybe a highlight reel of 20 minutes or so?
Sure.
Before I bring you back for the next one, because it's very timely right now what's going on. This in Northern Ireland, we had a man who was attacked by a Sudanese migrant the other night. His prognosis is he lost one eye and he's got heavy damage to another. This Sudanese migrant was supposedly seen cutting or trying to cut this guy's head off in public. And so there was that very choppy video that was released. We talked earlier today about psy-ops. And to me, that just rang of a psy-op. That was like trying to stir up the people of Northern Ireland and the entire UK, for that matter, into believing that every single illegal immigrant or migrant into their country is going to war with them. And there have been videos, Matt, released of this resistance group based, I guess, loosely on the IRA. Blurry videos, once again, of guys wearing masks and saying, we're not going to take this lying down. We're not giving up our country. I mean, what's your take on that?
At this point, I tend to be very distrusting anytime I see an act of terrorism anywhere and I'm told how to feel about it. I'm immediately very distrusting of whatever the narrative shapers are telling me how to feel about a horrible act of terrorism. Yeah. Because I've done a lot of work on this, and I pointed out that I don't trust CSIS. I don't trust the RCMP. I don't trust the CIA. I don't trust the MI6. The reason why I don't trust these things is not only because they became the tools used by unreconstructed Nazis after World War II under NATO's secret armies, which is provably the case, but they were also caught from the 1970s managing things like COINTELPRO in the United States, where the FBI and the CIA were both caught, proven to be funding radicalization movements that would create acts of terrorism, so that the civil rights movements that had then hitherto been led by Martin Luther King Jr. would lose their viability because they were going violent, because they were induced to throw a Molotov cocktail or set a bomb, like we saw with the Weather Underground. That was a branch of this. They were calling themselves Marxist-Leninist terrorists out to fight American imperialism by setting up mailbox bombs across the United States, or the FLQ, doing it in Quebec, right? That's the way you're going to fight American imperialism and Canadian imperialism, is by killing civilians with bombs in their mailboxes. And you're like leaving Mao's red book everywhere you go, saying like, "Vive la Revolution, go Castro." It's like, no, actually, when you scratch on the surface of that stupid story, you start seeing that they were always directed by the RCMP in Canada. They were directed by the FBI in the United States, the Weather Underground. The Red Brigades in Italy that killed Prime Minister Aldo Moro and were carrying out the Years of Lead terrorist acts against the population to keep the population in a state of terror, afraid of communist terrorists during the 70s, 60s, and 70s. They were being run by Operation Gladio Italian fascists from the top. Same thing for the French versions. So this is proven. Like, you can know that this is the modus operandi. I could see that Al-Qaeda itself, Islamic extremism, was not even a real thing in a serious way until it got $500 million in 1979 to 81 by Jimmy Carter, who signed off on Zbigniew Brzezinski's program for Operation Cyclone, in order to, as they justified, we have to defeat the Soviet Union. So if that means we need to create radical Islam as a way to create a crisis in the soft underbelly of Russia and Afghanistan, so be it. It's a necessary evil. And Zbigniew in 1997 gave an interview where he admitted that was his greatest success, was his creation of Islamic terrorism in Afghanistan, Pakistan, and beyond, because the Soviet Union collapsed by falling into their own Afghanistan and spread themselves too thin. And he's like, it was worth it. It was, even though this thing then became what it became. And so in Fordham University did a study in 2013. Very difficult to find the study now. It's almost been washed out, but you can find coverage from The Nation magazine, the Christian Science Monitor, other things that talk about the study. And they summarize what the study found after doing about a year's worth of data processing. They looked at every single case of FBI, every single case where the FBI stopped a terrorist cell in the United States since 2001, excluding 2001 itself, which was not even done by a guy in a cave. And they found that over 89% of those cases were being managed by FBI agents, right? 89% of those cases. Ramul Akinwal, right? That guy recently who shot up and killed a couple of people in the United States. My wife did a whole paper on this guy. He was one of the top assets for U.S. Special Forces in Afghanistan, where he was running the night brigades, the infamous night brigades that would like slaughter whole villages in the middle of the night, men, women, and children, on behalf of this U.S. Special Forces that were doing this all over Afghanistan for 15 plus years, while also overseeing the growth of this massive opium heroin syndicate, which 89 to 95% of the world heroin production during Afghanistan's, while the Americans were in Afghanistan running that thing up until 2022, that was all Afghan heroin that was coming into or Afghan opium that was all being overseen by these same special forces that were then creating these agents, these mind control MK Ultra like operatives, who were then sent back into the United States afterwards, or into Canada, and they find themselves committing acts of terrorism. Whether were they monarch mind control, I don't know. I have no clue. But I don't believe this story when I'm told that he represents just like a lone gunman, or the embodiment of this ignorant Afghan, civilization that's infested the American society. I don't believe that at all. This is not natural. It's all being controlled by top-down forces. So
right.
For this guy who tried to cut off the head of the poor fellow in the UK, I don't know his backstory, but I would not be surprised if there was some shady stuff as well. And Man, I don't know.
You know, it's interesting when you said Mossad, Tommy Robinson. I went, well, Robinson has been on social media nonstop for the past 48 hours ever since this happened, saying, we're not going to let this happen to our country. And he's very, very popular on social media, right? So this is, his messages are being retweeted constantly, to the point where he's going to work that country up into a froth, and there's going to be a civil war. It sure sounds like to me. And I'm thinking, you say Mossad Tommy Robinson, and I go, okay, so what's the real deal here then? Because like I said, like I talked about that on the show last night. It wasn't sitting right with me, that whole thing. The video in and of itself is so bad, right? Like in these days, I mean, these things, they can record in high def, in the dark, 30 yards away. And this was just not, it just wasn't convincing to me. But it's being taken to the next nth level now in the UK. It seems like they're trying to get something going over there, something bad. I mean, look at what's going on in Belfast right now. You got people are burning cars and houses and their entire communities because, and are they? Or is it some operatives who are being put into the mix who are doing it?
Well, that's the thing, right? There is an MO that I think it is so useful to study the technique of how the years of lead under the Cold War were organized, or in the same thing for Latin America. Why did so many Latin American countries go hard right in a bad way? Like not healthy conservative, but like Pinochet right? You can only account for that by looking at the fact that, again, Latin America was under Operation Condor, run as a massive Green Berets U.S. Special Forces laboratory, number one. U.S. Southcom, still to this day, has 77 military bases. Their primary training center for a lot of their hard terrorist types was Panama. Up until 1999, that was the center, and it had been since the 1950s, where they were overseeing the carrying out of kidnappings, torture, the complete erasure of whole towns. Every union organizers, union activists would be killed nonstop. But a lot of that was made possible by the fact that they were also setting up terrorist cells that would then shoot up a church and say, "Vive la Révolution, vive Karl Marx." But it wasn't them. It was part of what Colonel Fletcher Prouty, the guy that inspired Oliver Stone's film JFK.
Right.
Fletcher Prouty is Deep Throat, played by Kiefer Sutherland or Donald Sutherland in the movie against Kevin Costner's Garrison.
Yeah, Jim Garrison.
Jim Garrison, thank you.
Yeah.
But Colonel Fletcher Prouty wrote several books, one of which was on The Secret Team in 1973, where he goes through this, and he goes through the techniques of how the Vietnam War was sold to American politicians who were brought into Vietnam. And he goes through how U.S. Special Forces operatives were assigned to masquerade as if they were Viet Cong, and they would train Vietnamese and even Filipinos who would be brought in, would be trained like Akinwal was in Afghanistan, to become part of their night raiding brigades that would go and kill whole villages of people, and then say, "Hey, we're with the communists." They leave a card, and
my communist card. Right? Yeah. For more information, call area code 416. That's funny. Okay, you know what? I mean, I've taken up almost 2 hours of your night here. I appreciate it. And there's still a couple more things I want to get to. And sure. Guys, we're going to get Matt back. We're going to get him back. He's a busy dude. He's got lots going on, but we're going to get him back. Sure. Mark Carney, second last thing. Who is this guy? What is he doing exactly? I mean, are the conservatives correct? We could go into the entire Canadian political system and all of that, but we haven't got the time for that tonight. So let's just Mark Carney. This guy is the representative of the city of London, I believe. Maybe even one of the architects of what the hell's going on. I don't know how high up this guy is, but he sure seems to have a lot of play in the world, doesn't he?
Yeah, Johnny Vedmore has done an interesting bit of research into some of his family connections. You know, he looked at Mark Carney's father, his grandfather. I find that interesting. He didn't blow my mind, but it was interesting to map out some of these connections. But it does bring us into this weird convergence between this fascist entity inside of the Vatican and within the Anglican Church, which is at the sort of one of the nerve centers inside of the British Empire. And for example, Mark Carney's brother, whose name I'm forgetting all of a sudden, is the manager of the estates of William and Kate, who will be the next king, for example. So you got to be very highly vetted. And like, why just some schmo from a Canadian, you know, technocratic family would be awarded such a position says something. What exactly it says, I still have to answer that question myself. But Carney as well, right? The guy was a Goldman Sachs, you know, operative. He came out of Oxford, was positioned in Goldman Sachs as an investment banker, just like Steve Bannon was. Goldman Sachs gets you closer to, I think, the heart of the practical organizing of the big game currently in play, including the growth of Silicon Valley front groups, which have also penetrated into China. It's not like they're coming out of China into our world. They've come out of Silicon Valley and Stanford into China, as I've written about in many of my essays, and my wife's currently writing a book on this. That's the thing that is behind a lot of the. So Carney is tied to this pedigree, as he was then brought into becoming, you know, a high-level civil servant in 2002, 2003 with the Bank of Canada. And yeah, I mean, to rise in at such a young age, to be given such positions like the governorship of the Bank of Canada in 2008 and be sold and marketed, even back then, I could tell when I was following some of the news feeds that the way that they were speaking about him during the financial crisis was as if they were selling him for a future prime ministership. It was overly heroic in the language used to fluff up his character in the minds of the idiot liberal, you know, readership of Globe and Mail.
The thing about the appointment of Mark Carney as the governor of the Bank of Canada is that it was done by Stephen Harper.
Yeah.
Right. And so you kind of go, wait a minute here. For all of the people watching who believe that Stephen Harper was one of the greatest prime ministers in Canada's history, there are people that would beg to differ with you on that based upon the things he did to us that nobody ever really talks about these days.
No.
You know, signing on to the UN Agenda 17 Sustainable Development Goals is a start. And there's a whole bunch of other things as well that we could go into. But Mark Carney, go ahead.
No, yeah. It was good times for like Western oil deals. But I mean, there's so many other things that he signed on to that are reprehensible. And yeah, he's a complete age. I think a more noble conservative role model would be probably Diefenbaker in my mind.
Agreed. Yeah.
But
I don't think he knew what he was getting himself into back in those days, though.
No.
I mean, this dude, like, he thought, okay, I'm going to straighten things out. No, you're not.
No. Hey, we can do a show on that too. So yeah, no. Then Carney, the fact that after doing this and being sold as the guy that got Canada through he saved Canada and kept us, kept our clean and conservative banking culture stable, got him into a position all of a sudden working for the Financial Stability Board at the Bank of International Settlements, where he oversaw with Mario Draghi at the same time the Green New Deal banking codes and the bail-in regimes that he also drafted and inserted into bank codes across the transatlantic world, across Europe. The Dodd-Frank bill, it was brought into Canada in 2016. And then heads the Bank of England while he's doing all of this, to be then sent back to then manage Justin Trudeau and then be ultimately Trudeau's replacement. No, I mean, he's a very concerning character. He's so highly adapted to the power milieu that he's been operating within that, like, he's very competent. He very much knows what he's doing, whereas Justin was a shadow of a shadow of a shadow. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
Carney knows there is something there, as though, albeit sick. His wife concerns me as well when you look into some of her backstory and her work overseeing Canada 2020 as this very, very influential think tank. that has shaped so much over the past 20 years. People don't even realize. So Carney is, I think he has an assignment. Part of it is to create or to promote an image of weaponize this superficial Canadian synthetic nationalism that was created by Pearson and by Pierre Elliott Trudeau in the 60s. So there was a fake nationalism that was literally created, kind of like the Beatles were created. Same thing for our Canadian nationalism, was created to weaponize and to make us more pliable, thinking that we're being champions of liberty and anti-American. That's part of the idea. The Canadian New Nationalism, for those who don't know what that is, as it was enshrined by Walter Lockhart Gordon and George Grant, the two fathers of Canada's New Nationalism, who came out with the idea of give us it's like we need a flag, we need an anthem, and then of a maple leaf of all things that means nothing. Except we like maple, we like maple syrup.
I said the same thing a couple of weeks ago, and the backlash was enormous. So
whatever, it is what it is. It's the truth.
I agree.
But yeah, the whole thing became configured around the idea of being anti-American, and that was like the new Canadian identity was going to be to double down on our anti-Americanism, and we like hockey, maybe, which is already there anyway. So that's what like Carney is really acting like this patriarchal figure in a time of crisis when we're being threatened once again by the big evil boogeymen Americans, and we have to sort of unite once more around this Pierre Elliott Trudeau kind of like Tim Hortons father figure archetype.
But then 2 weeks ago, he goes to New York and he says, "Strong Canada will make America great again." Like, yeah. What?
Well, like, then too as well, right? Like, and then he talks about how he wants Canada to participate in the Golden Dome, this missile defense shield that involves Space Force around the entirety of the Americas. That looks a little bit too much like what Elon Musk's grandfather was pushing for with the Technocracy Incorporated controlled, region of the North American Technate.
Yeah. This is something I wanted to discuss with you. We'll do it briefly and maybe do a whole show on it down the road. But I mean, this whole Don Rowe doctrine that Trump is doing these days. I mean, Greenland, kind of a big deal. He's got to deal with them, right? Mexico, he's pretty much got them all wrapped up. He's got Venezuela, Central America. He's got Panama. He wants the Western Hemisphere. And the only thing he doesn't have yet is Canada. Now, maybe Alberta, I don't know how that's going to roll out, but this looks to me scarily like that Technate map from the 1930s and 40s.
Okay, so what I've been saying from the beginning, when Trump began with this 51st state thing, my concern, and it's like, in principle, I'm not even against that if it's done well. In principle, my concern is the way the game board has been set up as it stands. My fear has been, since the very first moment, I've been on record warning that this might be a trap to get the U.S. to fall into the British Empire, and less so to get the U.S. to save Canada from the British Empire, but more to get Canada to America to fall into the British Empire via Canada, which was the same trap that was first put into motion in 1801, or actually 1800, by Aaron Burr, there was 3 previous attempts to break up and undo 1776 and the victories of 1776 using British control mechanisms in North America. At the time, they were much smaller in size than they are today, but the British colonies above the 13 new states after the War of Independence were what Aaron Burr wanted to be absorbed into. So he wanted to break the free states that did not have slavery away, create a new federation that would then join up with the British colonies of Lower Canada, Upper Canada, and then create a new special relationship with England. He had counterparts in British-run Freemasonic networks in the Scottish Rite at that same time, who were organizing to do the same thing in the Confederate slave states, to say, okay, we'll undo the Constitution, erase it, create a new confederation, and have a special relationship with England out of the slave states. So both the Northern free and the Southern slave were supposed to break up at that time. Aaron Burr was the godfather of that. He tried it again a second time when Alexander Hamilton blocked him made sure that that didn't work. And he did that by getting Thomas Jefferson to become president when against Aaron Burr, who lost by 1 vote, and that was entirely Alexander Hamilton's work that got Burr to lose and put all of his work into getting his political nemesis Jefferson to become the leader. People are still confused. Like, why did Alexander Hamilton fight so hard to get his enemy Jefferson to become president? Because he knew that Jefferson wasn't a traitor. He just didn't like him.
Right.
Burr was
Big
a traitor.
difference.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then he tried it again. Then Burr tried it a second time in 1804, but he had to become governor of New York for that to work. But he had a whistleblower who revealed that he had this conspiracy with the British to do the same thing again and again. It was Alexander Hamilton that defeated that project, that forced it to the surface, that made sure he couldn't win the governorship of New York. And he basically tricked. He was able to eliminate Alexander Hamilton from the field through a bullet. And then he tried it a third time in 1807. And that time, when it didn't work because there were members of his own conspiracy that blew the whistle, a member of Congress went to President Jefferson and said, hey, there's this Burr conspiracy right now to create a Western Union with the British to like kill you and create a new empire by joining Canada. Yeah.
By the way,
Yeah.
just wow.
So that defeated it. And where Aaron Burr went when that failed to succeed is he immediately went to Canada, where his nephew was the Governor General of Canada. He had been he had married into the family of the Prévosts, and George Prévost was the Governor of Canada. And he gave him letters of introduction to Jeremy Bentham and Lord Castlereagh in England, where he lived for 5 years in Jeremy Bentham's personal mansion, having the best 5 years of his life in this like orgiastic, drug-ridden fantasy land before being sent back to oversee the War of 1812 to undo America again. So it's like, this is a part of this. High school history classes would be so bloody interesting if this stuff was taught, but also our ability to see how some of the strategies, because you can only understand the Civil War by understanding this, because the Civil War was just another iteration to do again what Burr had tried and failed to do 3 or 4 times. And then it was a little bit more successful, though Lincoln kept it together. But I think that idea, that battle plan, never was garbaged, and it's still in play, I think. But it would involve perhaps a replication of a bit of chaos in America, maybe induced by an economic collapse, maybe a little bit of civil war caused by race wars, maybe. To add some gasoline onto the fire for a period.
Well, haven't we heard that the Canadian forces have come up with some kind of a battle plan just in case the Americans invade? This was in the last couple of months. They said that Canadians would have to learn to fight like the Taliban or something. I just think
like guerrilla warfare. Yeah. I don't exactly know. I don't know if the Canadians have like that kind of fighting spirit inside of them, even if they wanted to mobilize it. But it's true. Like, that's actually being discussed at the highest levels of the Canadian military, and yes, that's a concern. And Carney's talking about beefing up, tripling our military spending and our I don't know what the viability is of that. I think that it's probably.
You said that you're concerned about the Americans falling into a trap of being absorbed back into the UK through Canada.
Yeah.
And now I'm concerned about it. So, like, how would that go? I mean, I just don't see them having that kind of power, even economically, to be able to do something like that.
Well, I think it would require a certain pulverization process where the U.S. would have to go through a meat grinder for a little period to soften itself up and undo a lot of its circuitry, so that it would then look to Canada, which might appear perhaps to be more stable comparative to the shit show that might be seen inside of a USA 3-4 years from now, maybe. And under such chaos, you could do a lot when there's that much disorder going around. People's desire to get some stability, to feed their families, to get some order again, gets very high, and they're willing to make accommodations they would not normally ever make if times were normal.
Right.
So,
that's part of the plan too that we've been talking about for the past few years, right? Create so much destabilization that people are going to be begging for somebody to come in and grab control over it, right?
Well, that's the thing, right? Yeah. So yeah, and at that point, that's the way Rome was able to become made into an empire. Rome had 14 years of civil war, right? After Julius Caesar is killed. So Julius Caesar does allow himself idiotically to become the emperor, the man god. He shouldn't have. Maybe whether he knew better or not, his decision was what it was. And by doing that, he opened up the door to a big demon. And he got assassinated by Brutus and company. But then that immediate assassination resulted in 14 years of civil war, a brutal, wasting civil war that only ended in like 32. This is like he dies in 44, 45 BC. It ends in 32 BC. So that's a period where the Roman population suffered a lot. And then they were much more inclined to say to Emperor Octavius, his nephew, whatever you want, just you're the man god forever. We won't fight back. And they embraced becoming a new empire now, and they let go of any aspirations to defend their republican heritage.
It wasn't too long after they fell, right? Because they were so weakened and completely discombobulated from the inside.
Well, they had a period of illusory growth where they did dramatically grow in scope and size and scale by absorbing and getting expansionist like crazy. They did do that for a couple of centuries. So like 117 AD is when they really peaked. But then by, I think, just defying natural law and relying more and more on slave labor, on creating more of this chosen people ideology within because if you're a Roman, you're an overhuman. You're a better type of human. You're a citizen. You're not like any of the brown people or any of the people on the offskirts who are destined to be our slaves. They're destined to be exploited. They don't get rights. Rights are for citizens. So that created this egotistical, I think, corruption in the minds, just like it did later on for the Germans, or the French and Napoleon.
Maybe soon for the Americans.
Well, that's the danger when you listen to like Steve Bannon or others talking about their idea of what it means to be a citizen. It isn't what Lincoln was thinking. It wasn't what JFK was thinking. It's something else that's philosophically of their view.
Steve Bannon should be on the run right now. He's in the Epstein file so much. This is going to be the worst segue, I think, in the history of me. But because it's like 2 hours and some now, I did. The original point of this was to get Matt on to talk about this disclosure nonsense that's been going around social media and coming from the U.S. government for the past couple of months. Not just the last couple of months. It's been building for a while now, but it's reached fever pitch in the last couple of months. You've got representatives talking about things they've seen in skiffs. We're not talking just about videos now. We're talking they're actual representatives of the United States House of Representatives they're talking about human alien hybrids. They're talking about creatures from a different dimension, not necessarily from a different solar system, a different part of the galaxy. They're talking about a different dimension. Maybe Stargate was real. I mean, they're talking about these things now, and so are major news networks. And Disclosure Day, just ironically, happens to be coming out, what is it, tomorrow or Friday night, the new Steven Spielberg movie.
The 12th of June, yeah.
Yeah, so Friday night. So I got to ask you, you've done a lot of looking into this kind of thing. It's all over your website. Well, no, not all over it, but there are definitely some parts to it.
It's a high emphasis. I place a high priority on this topic, yes.
Yeah, Canadian Patriot Review, CanadianPatriot.org, you guys, by the way, in case you want to go check Matt out online. And then, of course, there's Canadian Patriot Press, the great YouTube channel. So what's your take on this? And you told me, psy-op, in your response.
Psy-op.
Yeah, is it all of it a psy-op? Everything?
If you want the shortest possible answer, because I know we have limited time. And by the way,
man, I mean, like it's up to you, because I don't want to,
I'll give you. We can unpack anything you want, but in the shortest possible, quickest way I could say it is, it's not just a political economic reset that has been an ambition for the past several generations of oligarchical conspiring. Some people have called it the Age of Aquarius. Other people have called it the Age of Horus. Hitler called it the Thousand-Year Reich. But it's not just political. It's not just simply cultural in the conventional sense. It's also religious. And there has been an intention to create a new set of religious institutions with new gods to replace the old gods and old ethical orders that are supposed to be obsolete as we move into the new millennium, that are a revival of the old ancient demonology and Gnostic archonologies. So the Gnostics had their whole pseudo-Christian, they're basically satanic versions of Christians in the first few centuries after Jesus, who had a cosmology of evil based on the idea that everything is evil because everything is made in the image of an evil creator god of the Old Testament. Yaldabaoth, they even gave him a name. And that all acts and thoughts of evil, all acts of vice, are caused by archons, these autonomous entities that make up the framework of our soul, of our body, that ultimately we have to learn how to purge out of by integrating good and evil. So every act of good that we have, every good thought is caused by an autonomous entity. It's not caused by anything of our sovereign free will, our soul, none of that. That's an illusion. It's actually a composite. Everything is a composite of autonomous beings, entities of light, entities of darkness inside of us that we have to merge together in ritual fashions, often through things like orgies mixed with murder, sacrifice, drugs, and doing certain combinations of these things overseen by higher initiated priests or whatever, who are like helping the initiate through this process. They are becoming purged of these foreign entities and becoming self-actualized divine beings of light, basically gods. This is sort of the formulation for Aleister Crowley's, magical workings of Thelema and all that shit that permeates Hollywood and the music industry and everything else.
Yeah, like I've been noticing a very, very large helping of satanic shit that's been poured our way the last few years, especially. It seems like they're getting bolder with it.
Yeah, it's a big coming out party. It's really heavy. It's almost like impossible if you want to just like kick back. And I like watching movies. I like watching shows, just like wind down a little bit. So I'll turn on my Netflix. I'll turn on Amazon Prime and just try to like watch a show. It's freaking hard to find something that's not satanic. It's like everything's nudging me towards Satanism. It's like it's pretty loud.
Yeah.
Including in the music industry too, right? But all that to say, so it's not separate from what has been in motion since 1946, 47. But ironically, the moment the Nazi plan for a new world order was aborted and they needed a new plan at that moment, it's not a coincidence that at that moment you had the new myths of the Roswell crash, of the Arnold sightings.
Oh my God.
So all of that was being brought online at that very same moment. That never occurred to me.
It's funny. Like you say that, like, all right, you mentioned the Beatles earlier tonight, huge Beatle fan, but they got to America 2 months after Kennedy was killed. They knew the Americans were in like a funk, and that was the perfect time to launch the Beatles and the whole 60s counterculture, all of that stuff. And the drug culture.
British invasion. They called it the British invasion, right? It's like a name.
Wow.
Yeah. And I would also say too, like, something I was just talking about with one of my friends. He runs the Gnostic Informant YouTube channel. It's a great researcher, and we're just shooting the shit a little bit on texting and talking about Carl Jung's role in overseeing the translation popularization of the Nag Hammadi Gnostic scriptures in 1946. They were discovered in 1946 or December 1945 in Egypt. And right 18 months later, you had the Dead Sea Scrolls, also discovered in, I guess, the Qumran community outside of the Dead Sea area, in a cave. And the stories associated with how both of these big finds were discovered right after World War II, I also find very, personally, I find it very curated. It's almost like some kids just throwing rocks into caves, and here's like a clay pot break and discovers like thousands and thousands of texts of the Dead Sea Scrolls, in a cave, as if nobody has been in these caves for 2,000 years. And all of a sudden this kid just is throwing rocks and they're all there. Or these other guys who just find these urns full of these Nag Hammadi Gnostic scriptures from the 4th century. And they're not even like, it's not an excavation. They were just like right there at the bottom of a cliff. And it's like, come on, really? For like 2,000 years or whatever, 1,600 years, nobody noticed they were just there?
Well, right? I mean, this kind of stuff, you know, if you look at the Simpsons stuff, now people say, they're predicting. No, they're not. I mean, whoever is writing that stuff, Matt Groening, I guess, is the guy, right? He's injecting stuff that he already knows into these shows.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're controlling the outcome of the game, then predicting where the game is going is not that hard. You're not a prophet. You're not an oracle. You're just privy to information by the game masters who are feeding you info to put into your scripts to then like refer back to later on and blow people's minds, right? But it's part of the magic trick. So I think this is kind of the same thing too. I presume, based on now what I've come to know about the nature of the Gnostic inner structure and belief structure of these mystery cults that have been like shaping the growth of Nazism, that are at the heart of the security complex that also runs the Canadian security state. I think that it is tied to the UFO game. So both putting into motion these two seemingly different things after World War II of setting into motion this fringe ET story and certain stories that would then, you know, feed into this new legend, often using anecdotal testimonials and what have you. And then the Gnostic dark Jesus, because it's a different Jesus than the one you see in the Bible that is featured in the book of Thomas, the book of Philip, the book of Mary Magdalene, the secret apocryphon of John, all of these things that are revealed, the Sethian Gospels, as they call them, right? Where Jesus is actually the avatar of the snake, the essence of Lucifer. Jesus is Lucifer in these Gospels. And God is that.
I've heard this. It's blasphemy, man. Like that stuff, that's crazy to me. Like when it's like, no, Jesus is actually the devil. What? No. Now we're going too far here, right? Would you say, Matt, because you know you're a historian among so many other things, that 90% or more of everything that we have learned and been exposed to in our lifetimes, you know, for even anybody who's alive on the planet today, is all bullshit?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater. There's good things.
That's why I said 90%.
Yeah. Sure. Why not? Yeah, okay. I'll go with that. I'll take that. Yeah.
I mean, crazy. Dude, thanks for coming on tonight. You know what? I know that it's been 2 hours and 17 minutes. And I just want to thank you for your insights tonight and for talking about... Let me just
give a little shout out to RB Ham, my buddy RB Ham.
Is RB watching?
Yeah, he's watching. He's been... I noticed that he was like commenting in the live stream. So yeah, a little shout out. Hey.
Oh, there RB. He is. Yeah. RB. Okay.
All right.
Cool. There he is.
Soon, Barbie.
And you want to know what? RB, there he is. Well, I didn't nail it, RB. That was Matt. But and you know, I haven't commented on this since it happened, but RB very close to our friend Mark Friesen, who passed away a couple of weeks ago, and I haven't had the chance out here on social media to talk about that. And so, guys, I just want to let you know that guy, Mark Friesen, the Grizzly Patriot, was kind of a mentor to me in terms of pushing me in the right direction. And he did it so nicely. He never got impatient with me either, right? This is when I was still wrapped up in the political idea that maybe we can do some kind of a political solution. And Matt, we talked on the phone this afternoon about, I don't want to ever leave people at the end of any show, whether it's a half an hour or 2 hours, with the thought that we can't do anything, right? I mean, we're not blackpilling anybody here. We're not trying to tell you guys, that's it, you're doomed, because there's always something that you can do.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely. No, that is so important. And, you know, at the end of the day, I think that truth itself is a power. You know, like when you really have knowledge of something, if you really understand it, one, you're not afraid of it, or you're less inclined to be afraid of it than if you're ignorant of the thing. Number two, if you really understand it, then you know also what it's afraid of. And the oligarchy is understandable. It's more complex than people realize. like it's more sophisticated. People have to expect more of their mind to comprehend the essence of this evil continuity. Don't be simplistic about it. But once you really do start getting a sense of the thing, you start seeing that it has weak spots. It has things that render it insecure, that render it fearful. And people who, like I mentioned in passing in the course of our little chat today, John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, when you read their speeches, when you look at their policies, when you look at their philosophy, when you look at how they made their decisions and points of discernment and policy orientations and thought about the future and organized their way of communicating to others and to talking with themselves, you start seeing that they've tapped into a well that is the same thing that the enemies of the oligarchy of Aeschylus, in the time of, when Greece was battling the Persians in the battle at Marathon, that same well that Aeschylus was drawing from when he was coming up with his incredibly insightful and empowering and edifying stories and lessons wrapped in mythology that he then composed artistically for audiences for all times to access and to draw power from. You can start seeing why John F. Kennedy and Bobby Kennedy would often quote from Aeschylus publicly in their speeches. That's what they're drawing from, that source. That's what Socrates and Plato were drawing from when they were also coming up with their insights that were giving us all tools to awaken that divine spark within us that the oligarchy is really afraid of. So I would just say, as just the briefest way to end, is just to think about that, that aspect of what the oligarchy is afraid of. Do more of what your enemy is afraid of, and also the videos. Thank you so much for helping me to amplify some of the videos that my wife and I have been producing, including the Black Sun Rising video on esoteric fascism, past and present, and our new UFO series too, for people who want to know about my specific, more detailed thoughts about the UFO CIA psy-op that's being used to create a new set of religions around ET gods. It's called The Hidden Hand Behind UFOs, and its episodes 1 to 4 are all available now on YouTube as well as on Rumble, and they can go to my website, Canadian Patriot.org, and my Substack as well, that Michael Blythe. Thank you, Michael, for sharing that. You'll be able to find all of that there.
Yeah. I watched the UFO series. Fantastic work. And I remember asking you too, I said, so what's the deal with Stephen Greer anyway? And you said he's mentioned in episode 3 and 4. So I got to go watch 3 and 4 then.
Did you watch it?
Oh yeah, Matt. I watched it all. Yeah, cool, I definitely. Man. And you guys should too. Matt, thank you again for coming on tonight. And I got to get you back at some point soon. We'll work it out.
All right, man. Yeah, let's
okay, man.
Right.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Take it easy. There is Matt Ehret, you guys. And that's it for the show tonight. I want to thank you for being here. Don't forget, like and share. Get this out to as many people as possible. And the reason I say that is because they don't want us communicating with each other. They don't want us sharing information or ideas. Matt is absolutely correct about that. So when you get this out there, other people hear it and they go, oh, cool. And maybe they'll share it and so on and so on and so on and so on. Double mint gum. So please get it out there. If you would like to support the show, and I do come out here on social media every now and again when I've got a great interview like Matt Ehret. If you want to support the show, if you want more content like this, I do a show every single night at 8 o'clock Central. I put it on Telegram and the Shadow at Night community there. I think it's called the Shadow Davis Show now. I changed the name of the group to the Shadow Davis Show. You can find it on Telegram. Go ahead and join up. Check it out for yourself for a couple of nights. And if you like it, I urge you to become an all-access member at shadowdavis.com. You can join monthly or you can join annually. Again, thank you guys very much for being here tonight. I truly appreciate it. I love you all. I appreciate you all. I hope you have a great sleep tonight and a great day tomorrow. Bye for now.